so. Because you waited for it. And it's yours. Let me move. Let me take you to
It is so. It is so.
because you waited for it. And you didn't give up. God heard you. And it is so. Hallelujah. Hey, and it is so. And it is so. And it is so. And you shall have. Hallelujah. But God has promised you. And it is so. From the 5th chapter of the book of Romans. Verse. Romans 5:1 says, therefore, since we have been justified through faith, we have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ, through whom we have gained access by faith into this grace in which we now stand. And we boast in the hope of the glory of God. Not only so, but we glory in our suffering, because we know that suffering produces perseverance, perseverance produces character, and character produces hope. And hope does not put us to shame, because God's love has been poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who has been given to us. Let me do it again. Therefore, since we have been justified through faith, we have peace with God through our Lord Jesus Christ, through whom we have gained access by faith into this grace in which we now stand. Hallelujah. And we boast in the hope of the glory of God. Not only so, but we glory in our suffering, because we know that suffering produces perseverance. Perseverance makes character. And character produces hope. And hope does not put us to shame, because God's love has been poured into our hearts through the Holy Spirit who has been given to us. Let me share a thought with you, and it's very brief, and we're going to be together in communion. Amen? Some years ago, I had an experience, and I want to share it with you. It's important. Amen. Talk amongst yourselves and we're going to find it. Amen. I sort of lost my way there for a minute. Hallelujah. Glory to Jesus.
Yes, Lord. Yes, Lord.
Keep on.
Yes, Lord.
Hallelujah.
Yes, Lord. Yes, Lord.
Hallelujah. Bless your name.
Yes, Lord.
Hallelujah. Bless your name.
There is a great tendency that we have as the people of God
Bless your name, Jesus.
to doubt our experiences. If our experiences, son, are not the same as the experiences of others. Makes us doubt the authenticity, the validity of our experiences. When Jesus died and rose from the dead in the telling of the crucifixion and resurrection stories, he said, "Send for my disciples and Peter."
Okay.
And it was primarily because Peter had taken a turn. During the time that Jesus was in his earthly ministry, and he got tired of following what seemed to be a loser.
Well, Lord.
It's true, because he was expecting more of Jesus. More. You understand what I'm saying? He was expecting more. He was expecting him to get a throne and get some money and build a church, and you know what I mean? More. And then this prophet, with all of these things and miracles going on, couldn't stop the people from killing him. Anybody understand? Jesus couldn't stop the people from killing him. And when it was apparent that he was about to be killed, and the people were going after his disciples too, they went after Peter. And he said, I don't know him. Somebody said, oh, you know him. We seen you with him. He said, no, you didn't. He said, yes, we did. You were one of the principal spokespeople. That wasn't me. If somebody looked like me. But it wasn't me. And he realized that he had taken a turn. Anybody understand me? And so, long story short, Peter went back to fishing. After Jesus was killed, he said, well, I know one thing I can do. I can fish. And he went back to fishing. Anybody understand what I'm saying? And Jesus, when he called the disciples after the resurrection, he said, send for my disciples and Peter.
Okay.
The one who somehow thinks that the separation between me and him is of such that he is no longer one of mine.
Okay.
Anybody understand?
Okay.
It's a burden to be different.
Yes, it is.
It's hard to be odd person out. Some of us like it. We get off on it. But oftentimes it is a cover for the real loneliness associated with not being a part of something in a real and genuine and authentic way. Anybody hear what I'm saying? Send for my disciples and get Pete, because you all may not think that Pete is still with me. But I know Peter's heart. And the heart of Peter is more than the action. Anybody understand? So I wanted to relate something with you and leave you with this at our time of communion. My Uncle Gene, my grandfather's oldest child. Most of you have never seen him. If you were at my mother's funeral, he was the uncle that was in a wheelchair from amputation. He was my oldest uncle. And he lived longer than his youngest sister. We just lost him a few months ago. And we lived a different life, a separate life from Uncle Gene. He was Eugene Edward Jr. And my grandpa was Eugene Edward Sr. Uncle Gene, I remember the times when we were coming along when we used to pray for Uncle Will and Uncle Gene. Because Uncle Will was a backslidden preacher. That's the same Bishop Hamilton that you all know. During that time, he was a backslidden preacher, living a loose living life in the world. We used to pray for him that the Lord would save him and reclaim him. That was the Pentecostal word. Bring him back. And he'd come to the service and the old saints would sing comeback songs as soon as they saw him. They'd break out on him songs like, I'm coming back to Jesus, I'm coming back to Jesus, and I'm coming where living waters flow. They'd get right on him. I can hear my Savior calling as repentant tears are falling, and it's back to Jesus I must go. And my uncle would come to the service and the saints would get him. They would get him. Because he was a backslidden Will and Uncle Gene. And we wanted them to come to God and be included in our church. This is the operative part of this. Not just come to God, but come to our church. Because our understanding of God was the only real true understanding of God as far as we were concerned. Not just come to God, but come to us church. Well, us do what we do, how we do what we do. Anybody understand that? Uncle Will came all the way back to us church on a convocation official day. On my grandfather's official convocation Sunday. My Uncle Will came to service and sat in the back, and my grandfather was preaching, and when he finished preaching, he came down to pray. My brother Leonard knows, he knows this story. My Uncle Will started in the back of the church and cried all the way down the middle aisle.
Well.
My Aunt Primrose and my Aunt Lucille and my mother like to lost their minds. They ran back and forth across the front of the church. All three of them, they just ran like a relay race. Back and forth. My grandfather did something he never did. He took off his tie, took off his coat, his suit coat, and walked down the aisle and met my uncle halfway, and they fell on each other and wept and cried, and he brought my uncle to the altar with him. And that was a coming home that, like I'm telling you, it's a wonder that my aunties lived through it. Because those girls hooped and hopped and hopped and hooped and hooped and hopped. We couldn't hardly get out of church. I wish you could have seen how they did. I wish I could demonstrate. None of them could do it. Don't do it now. Don't do it now. But those girls carried on so, because they were so glad. And then they just commenced praying for Uncle Gene, that he would come all the way back. Now, my Uncle Gene, they were very concerned about him, because he didn't want to have anything to do with church and church people. But that was just the tip of the iceberg. He smoked cigarettes. He drank copious amounts of alcohol. Copious amounts. He was conspicuously known to be in the company of loose women. Anybody understand what I'm saying? Of Aunt Lucille, Aunt Primrose, and my mother, and my grandmother Bessie. Uncle Gene had a further distance to come than Uncle Will. He needed reparations in the highest way in order for him to be accepted and acceptable. Anybody understand? Essentially, Uncle Gene did not fit comfortably in our understanding of somebody even on their way back to God. Anybody understand what I'm saying? Do you all understand what I'm saying? So as children, we couldn't spend a lot of time with Uncle Gene. Our parents wouldn't let us be around him. Because when you hung out with him, you come back, you smell like cigarettes. And Uncle Gene would ask, he'd be drinking a little, and he would ask you if you want a little. And my parents were greatly concerned. He went to the movies, and he would take young people into the dance hall. And these things were not allowed. Uncle Gene did not fit. So we couldn't spend time with him. And I suspect one of the reasons he didn't want to have anything to do with church people is because he was the eldest.
Right.
And he knew more about church.
Okay.
He saw, he knew, come on now.
Yeah.
He understood some things. Who am I talking to? He watched the people. He knew the people. He had lived with the people longer than any of his siblings have lived with. He also knew, can I just tell the truth? He knew he had an elder brother. Who none of us knew about until my grandpa died. Anybody understand what I'm talking about? And it's hard to reconcile.
Come on now. Come on now.
How am I doing with this?
You doing good.
All of that, you can't smoke, you can't drink,
Right. You know too much.
but you got this
Right.
over here. And out of sight, out of mind. Anybody understand what I'm saying? So we just didn't talk about it. We just holified our way on into our future. Anybody understand what I'm saying? Uncle Gene, Uncle Eugene Jr., come on, the bishop's eldest son was not his eldest son.
Come on now.
This was not an easy life.
Well.
And whenever I saw Uncle Gene, he said, well, I know you love me. And I would say, yeah, I love you, Uncle Gene. And then the more he would hear about my life being a little edgy, he would say, now, I know you love me. And I'd say, oh, yeah, Uncle Gene. This is the way we communicate. I said, oh, yeah. I love you. Oh, but I really love you. You see what I'm saying? Let me leave this with you.
Right.
There's something that I regret. I regret that my Uncle Gene was never included in our Christmas dinners and Thanksgiving dinners.
Yeah.
He didn't come around, did he, Leonard? He never came around. I regret that Uncle Gene lived his whole life, of which we may know maybe a month's worth or 2 months' worth. His whole life was separate from all of us. Uncle Gene had 6 children. And we were barely able to really get to know each other beyond the time that we were underage, Leonard and I, because they were the children of Uncle Gene.
Right.
And my Aunt Betty, and they both smoked. Anybody understand? I regret because that was my uncle, and I'm probably in some ways more like him than I can even begin to explain to you. He said, you really love me, so I really love you. And here's what I pray for, that our spiritual legacy will be stronger than our religious practices and our cultures, and that we don't have a list of people who somehow don't fit and we don't connect to because they don't do the thing we do the way we do the thing we do. You gotta hear what I'm saying? All of our people who know God and their understanding of God, our siblings, our children, our colleagues, our friends, they may not do the thing we do, the way we do the thing we do. Come on now. Or where we do it, or with whom we do it. But the love of God is big enough to hold all of us in all of our separate ways and expressions in life. And let me tell you one more thing that God said to me the other day. The presence and the absence of people in our life, in our congregation, in our friend list, the presence or absence of people is not the litmus test of their relationship with God and how God is dealing with them. God is doing some things in the lives of people that you haven't seen for years. And because they're not talking to you about it, and they're not telling you about it, because you haven't connected the dots. While God was working on me, away from my mom, God was working on my mom, away from me. While God is working on you, away from your kindred, God is working on your kindred, away from you. While God is working on you, away from your children, God is working on your children, away from you. While God is working on you, away from your enemies, God is working on your enemies, away from you. And you may roll up on one, or 2 or 15, and find out that they're very different than at the place where you left them. And you may think it's because God changed them, but it is also because God has changed you. Anybody understand what I'm saying? Let me in here. Jesus knew that Peter struggled with the great loss of losing his loving Savior and friend. And he went back to fishing. Lots of things, my beloved, make people follow from afar off. And I want you to remember when you follow from afar off. Some of y'all stay home because you get your feelings hurt.
Come on now.
Because people can make you mad.
They can make you
I said, people can make you mad.
Hallelujah.
Hostile.
Yes, they can.
Want to punch him in the neck.
Teach, Bishop.
Call on God to keep it.
Come on,
As you see, it's a way that certain people's whole persona can just get on your nerves. And you see them coming, and a little of that gravy just runs all over your face. And you don't know what to do. I know about that. And sometimes we'll stay away from the community because we're offended. There are many things that'll make you follow from afar off. Sometimes it's because you made a dreadful mistake. And you're not ready to be reconciled. You don't want to be reconciled. I realize I shouldn't have said it, but I said it. And I'm going to rest for a few weeks.
I'll be back.
I said it.
I really said it.
I meant it when I said it. I know I shouldn't have said it, but I said it. And I said it. And that's that. And I may have to stay away for a minute. Get myself straightened out. There are a lot of reasons why we follow afar. Sometimes it is because we are suffering. And we need to suffer privately. And we don't want to suffer publicly. Am I telling the truth? And we follow from afar off. How am I doing with that? And we struggle with people seeing our wounds. Don't want people to feel sorry for us. Don't tell me you feel sorry for me, because that's not helpful. Thank you, but you know, I'm trying to get beyond this. Sometimes we want to suffer silently and quietly and privately. There are many reasons, but for whatever reasons, people do follow from afar off, but it does not mean that God is not dealing with our hearts. And I want to say to some of you that have been following from afar off, you are still with us.
That's right.
In community with us, in our hearts, in our minds, in our prayers. The litmus test of your being in community is not tested by whether or not you can always be in community.
Come on, Bishop.
Sometimes you're in trouble. And when you're in trouble, you have to work it out. So Jesus said what Jesus is saying today. Send for my disciples. And that one that's following me from a distance. And the word of the Lord to me vicariously to my Uncle Gene as he rests. I wish we had sent that word out to you.
Well,
I'm fully convinced that he made peace with God. Because now as I think about his life, he exemplified what people exemplify who have made peace with God. He wasn't a liar. He wasn't a gossip. He wasn't filled with evil speaking. Come on. He wasn't judgmental.
he was real.
He was authentic. Come on with me now. You can trust his word.
That's right.
Come on, come on. He was somebody who understood people. And he had the ability to let. See, not everybody knows how to let. A lot of people know how to make, but they don't know how to let. Anybody understand the difference? They're always trying to make you be something, make you do something, but they don't know how to let you be and let you do. Uncle Gene knew how to do that. That came from his own security. So I know he made peace with God. Perhaps he didn't have a Sunday when Aunt Prim and Aunt Seal and my mama and them was running, hooping and hopping back and forth across the church. But I declare to you, because all of them beat him to heaven, I promise you that when they looked up and saw him, I promise you that such another hooping and hopping and leaping and running happened at the entrance, at the beginning of eternity for my Uncle Gene. Hey, and I want to tell you something else. The circle that God has given us in Romans 5. Can I go there just one more time? The circle that God has given us in Romans 5 is broad enough. Tell somebody broad enough. Come on, tell them broad enough to include all of us. Therefore, since we have been justified by faith, we have peace with God. Tell your neighbor you're justified by faith, not by cigarettes, not by alcohol, not by sex, not by attendance. You are justified by faith. And you have peace with God. Now, if we're going to boast in the hope that we have in God. Glory in your suffering. Because your suffering is teaching you perseverance. And perseverance is giving you character. And your character is giving you hope. How do you know that you know God? It is determined by how you pass through your struggle. You want to know whether or not a person knows God. It's not on their hoop and holler. I know some of the most shallow people in the world that hoop and holler consistently and constantly. And they can't take nothing. Anybody understand what I'm saying? You can offend them just because you passed by them and didn't say good morning. They'll stay home from church 6 weeks because of a misunderstanding. I know people who hoop and holler who are incredibly thin-skinned. But when you know that you have peace with God, you are able to experience your suffering with perseverance and hope. Hallelujah! And confidence. That's what comes from a knowledge of personal connection with God. You don't get it through religion. Tell people it doesn't come through religion. Religion is a series of no's. God is yes. I of ooh,
Right. That's all it is.
That's all I remember the saints saying. You know you can't. You know you can't wear it. No, you can't go there. No, you can't go there. No, you can't. Get these earrings. No. But I love the scripture that says, in God, everything is yes and amen. In God, what happens first with God is the way is made clear and accessible. And then God says to you now, take this path and I'm going to give you some instructions to make your life good. So that the decisions that you make, you're not making them because you're afraid. You're making them because God has shown you how to make your life good. Does anybody understand the difference? We don't live by condemnation. We live by faith. Tell somebody I live by faith. Tell your neighbor, say, I'm over rules and regulations. Tell them, say, I'm over that. Wait, why you look at them, tell them they don't work anyway. Everything I wanted to do, I did anyhow. I just learned how to lie about it. You go ahead and tell it. I live by faith and not by fear. I live by hope and not by law. I live by confidence and not by low self-esteem. Why? Because we have peace with God. I'm going to leave this with you. If I had it to say to my Uncle Gene again, I would be saying to him that your life probably did more to model what peace with God really looks like, because peace with God doesn't require a whole lot of people to agree with you.
My Lord.
You get delivered from having to win a popularity contest. I'd love for you to like me, but it's okay. I would love for you to like me. I would love for everybody to like me and love me. I would love. But it's okay. It's okay. It really is okay. I said it's okay. There are many paths that I'm on I wouldn't have chosen if I was trying to get a bunch of people to like me. It's okay. If you don't like me, that's okay. I would rather that you did, but it's okay. Amen. I have learned that because when I look in the mirror, I've learned to like me. Anybody get that? You know what a deliverance that is? For a traditional Pentecostal? You know how hard that was? You know how many times the saints told me to beat my body under subjection? Told me to hate my flesh. Do you know how many times I heard that? And do you know that it flew in the face of everything? For me to one day say, stop.
That's the word.
Stop it. Stop it. Stop it.
Yes.
We studied on Tuesday night in Bible study. Stop it. Either I am fearfully or reverently and wondrously made, hallelujah, or I'm not.
Right.
I don't have to hate myself to learn the beauty of self-control.
That's right.
And it was only when I began to love myself that I began to understand the beauty of self-control. Does anybody understand what I'm saying? Hate byproduct is not a good life. Whether you hate yourself or hate somebody else, the byproduct of hatred is not a good life. The byproduct of hatred is condemnation and guilt. And hate, people who hate themselves, hate everybody. People who do not trust themselves, don't trust anybody. People who don't think well of themselves don't think well of anyone else. I'm trying to reach you. I need you to hear me in the spirit. God intends change to happen.